Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining today. I'm Nicole Winthrop, Program Associate at CCI. In this webinar, we'll go over an overview of the grant program, guidelines, and application components. I will also go over some questions at the end of the webinar that came up from the original recording. What is Investing in Artists? The Investing in Artists program first launched in 2007. There have been a few iterations of it since. Most recently, and for the current 3-year cycle, it supports artistic innovation through grants of up to $8,250, each for individual artists to create a new performing or media arts work that pushes the envelope of their creative process, explores new artistic collaborations, and/or supports artistic growth and experimentation that extends the boundaries of their art making. Projects must be completed within 12 months of the grant award start date. The emphases in this description are intentional. This grant supports individual artists, so collectives and collaboratives are ineligible, as are organizations too. This grant also supports the development of new work. If you have an ongoing project or a project that will premiere right at the start of the 12-month grant period, it's ineligible. Further, only work in the performing or media arts is eligible. This may include the disciplines of dance, theater, music, animation, XR, film, sound, or video, to name a few. If you're working in the visual or literary arts exclusively, this is not the category for you. Finally, investing in artists supports artistic innovation, which we define as pushing the envelope, exploring new collaborations, and/or extending the boundaries of one's art making. If you've applied previously, then you may have noticed that we have increased the grant award amount from $8,000 to $8,250. Previously, we only made 6 grants per cycle. We're now thrilled to be making at least 8. This is 2020 Investing in Artists grantee Vanessa Sanchez performing in the Mission in San Francisco. She received support for her project Ghostly Labor, a dance performance that brings together tap dance, son yaroko, and Afro-Caribbean rhythms to explore the history of exploitation of female labor in the US-Mexico borderlands. Eligibility. To preface this first criterion, CCI is doing something new for the next 3-year Investing in Artists Award cycle, which spans 2021 to 2023. Instead of opening up the program to 10 Bay Area counties every year, we're rotating eligibility. So for 2021, you must be a full-time resident of Alameda, Contra Costa, or San Francisco County at the time of applying and for the duration of the grant period, October 2021 to October 2022. For the 2022 cycle, applicants residing in Santa Clara, Santa Cruz, and San Mateo counties will be eligible to apply, while the 2023 cycle will make eligible applicants residing in Marin, Napa, Solano, and Sonoma counties. The application must be submitted by an individual working artist. Organizations, artistic companies, and collectives cannot apply. We define working artists as adults who have received training in an artistic discipline or tradition, spend 10 or more hours a week on their artistic practice, self-define as professional artists, and attempt to derive income from work in which they use their expert artistic practices and skills. Must propose a new project. We talked about this in the previous slide. Must have performed or presented artistic work in a public context, including online digital platforms, within the last 3 years. We added the online digital platform piece in acknowledgement of COVID's impact on in-person and live event production. Must be 18 years or older at the time of the application deadline. Cannot be a full-time or matriculated student. Cannot submit more than one application. Cannot have a conflict of interest, family, or financial relationship with the board, staff, or directors of Center for Cultural Innovation. If you're related to someone at CCI, or if you have an active contract, then you're ineligible. In this slide, we'll go over review criteria and timeline. Who's reviewing these applications? Well, CCI invites grant review panelists who are established field practitioners to make recommendations on final grant recipients. Reviewers change every year and are generally rooted in the region served by this grant. Panelists will evaluate applications against the following criteria: clarity, rationale, and readiness of proposed project, including identification of specific work plans, timeline, and collaborators, if any, required to carry out the project. One note about this criteria: if your project is intended for an in-person audience, we recognize that things remain fluid and you may not be able to secure a venue at the time of application submission. That's fine. A workaround in this regard would be to describe the types of venues you would want to work in, or to name venues where you've worked before and that you may be interested in partnering with again. You could also acknowledge in your project timeline when you anticipate having this aspect confirmed. Evidence that funding is coming at a critical juncture in the artist's career. That is, that the proposed project provides a significant opportunity to push the artistic boundaries at the right moment for the artist, and the potential long-term impact of the grant. In other words, there is a compelling rationale as to why the artist should be supported at this particular moment. This is the why now question, as in why support this artist now? And demonstrated record of artistic achievement and quality of work. This would be evidenced by the application attachments, which we'll talk about momentarily. As far as timeline, we're currently accepting applications and will be until Wednesday, August 18, 2021 at 12 p.m. Pacific, aka noon. There are no exceptions, so please submit your application well in advance of the deadline. This is 2020 Investing in Artist grantee Layla Weaver. Funding supported Play, Pray, a 4-channel video installation and publication series that explores the complexities of playful impulses, innocence, and the underlying violence implicated in harmless fun, while analyzing the structures and rules imposed on Black frivolity and sexuality from childhood to adulthood. Narrative, resume, and budget. Applications must be submitted through Submittable, CCI's online grants platform. We will not accept applications through email or otherwise. The application is pretty straightforward. It collects your contact information, the amount you're requesting, which can be up to $8,250, and you'll provide a one-sentence summary of your project. Next is the narrative section with 4 questions. The first of which asks you to describe the artistic innovation project for which you are seeking funding, providing details with regards to your timeline, required resources, and collaborators, if any. The next question is optional. If applicable, include up to 3 brief bios for the project's key collaborators. Then it's the why now question. Explain how your artistic innovation project is pushing the envelope for your artistic profession or practice, how it may affect your work in the future, and why it is important to undertake this project now. Finally, you're asked to provide a brief statement about your artistic practice and the nature of your work. The first 3 questions are limited to 350 words. The final question about your artistic practice is limited to 150 words. After the narrative section, you'll need to upload a 1-page version of your resume. We ask for a resume because it's a helpful at-a-glance reference for panelists to familiarize themselves with your experience and activities in the field. From there, you'll upload a 1-page version of your project budget. Project budgets should have an income and an expense section. The income section should list the Investing in Artists grant and the amount that you're requesting. You'll also list your expense line items. The amount you request from Investing in Artists should be balanced out by your total expenses. If your total expenses exceed the Investing in Artists grant amount, you'll want to list additional income sources and their status. This is a copy of the sample project budget that we've provided on CCI's website. In the income section, you'll see the status indicated for each funding source, including confirmed, pending, and prospective. In the expense section, we've made use of that 3rd column to include contextual notes about each line item. These are incredibly helpful for panelists to read as they interpret your budget. In addition to making notes in the budget itself, we provide an optional budget notes section where you can add even more context and detail about your budget projections. I strongly encourage you to take advantage of this additional bit of real estate as long as it isn't redundant. If you don't include notes in the project budget or the optional notes section, I guarantee the panelists will have questions about your budget assumptions, which will weaken your proposal overall. Work samples. The work sample is a critical part of the application and should represent your artistic work in the best possible light. We require at least 1 and no more than 3 work samples. Samples may include audio, visual, or written manuscripts. As far as the manuscript, this type of sample is specific to theater artists applying as playwrights only. Although we strongly prefer receiving video samples from all performing arts applicants. If you primarily identify as a playwright and believe that a text sample will show your work in the best context, you can upload a text sample for review. The panel will review up to 10 pages of manuscript playwrights only. This is super important. Panelists will review up to 5 minutes total. Keep this in mind when selecting samples that are lengthy. You may opt to cue your sample to a specific starting point or to edit it. If you're submitting more than one type of work sample, then you can't submit the recommended total for each type. For example, you can submit 2 minutes of audio and 3 minutes of video, but not 5 minutes of audio and 5 minutes of video. My recommendation is to edit your sample if it's lengthy. That way you ensure that the panelists are reviewing exactly what you want them to see or hear. Also, think about starting your sample at a bold or poignant moment. Panelists will be looking at many applications. You want to grab their attention instantly and ideally leave them wanting more. Finally, select examples of recent work and avoid samples that have poor visibility or audio quality. This is 2020 Investing in Artists grantee Maddie Clifford. She received support for Wild Seed, an innovative visual hip hop album that pays homage to Black women hip hop artists and science fiction writer Octavia E. Butler. Tips. We've put together a few tips and tricks that can support your submission to investing in artists as well as your grant proposals in general. Review all ephemera, guidelines, FAQs, application preview, sample project budget. It's there as a resource for you, so take advantage of it. Be clear and to the point. Avoid responses that are overly technical or dense abstract. This goes back to the review criterion regarding clarity and rationale of the proposed project. It's really tempting to use fancy words and industry terms. Avoid this. You'll have panelists who are representing various disciplines, and they may not understand jargon that's specific to your field. Provide budget notes. You have the real estate, use it. Have a friend, etc., look over your application to see if any important details were left out or whether anything is unclear. When you're working so closely to a project, it's easy to omit some of its most fundamental aspects, like an important date, site, or dimensions. Questions that came up in the live webinar. If the request is for recording an album, will there need to be live performance included? And I would suggest reviewing slide 9 from this webinar, and I will reference language from there that says, yes, select examples of recent work and avoid samples that have poor visibility or audio quality. So it doesn't necessarily need to be a live performance, but it should be an example of your recent work. Another question, if I am a literary artist making my first performing arts project, is it okay to include literary art samples? And I would reference slide 2 from this webinar and emphasize that only work in the performing or media arts is eligible. This may include the disciplines of dance, theater, music, animation, XR, film, sound, or video, to name a few. If you're working in the visual or literary arts exclusively, this is not the category for you. There is an exception to theater arts, for which a literary sample in the form of a manuscript would be acceptable. And I would reference slide 8, I believe, that goes over that in further detail. Third question, since the project is supposed to be innovative, including being a brand new direction for us, do we need to explain not only how it is different from what we have done before and what the work sample shows, but more importantly, why we think we would be capable of doing a good job of it? And I would reference slide 7 from this webinar. Explain how your artistic innovation project is pushing the envelope for your artistic profession or practice, how it may affect your work in the future, and why it is important to undertake this project now. You'll be asked to provide a brief statement about your artistic practice and the nature of your work. The first 3 questions are limited to 350 words. The final question about artistic practice is limited to 150 words. And you will also provide a resume to demonstrate your capability. So yes, you will be asked to explain, and we do provide guidelines for you in crafting your narrative. Finally, questions came up about specific types of projects. Our film festivals, podcasts, audio interviews eligible for investing in artists grant funding? And the answer is yes. So thank you so much. The contact information I left up deliberately for you. So if you have questions or need clarification or just further support, that is available to you. Email us at grants@cciarts.org. And you can reach me direct 415-288-0530.